this the one you want to look at, or? Oh, yeah. Okay.
So what is a good movement score?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So that's the most challenging part, I think, of the overall summary page. So 100% is perfect movement,
Okay.
which we can appreciate is not likely, right?
That's right.
Doing a lot of assessments, we don't have like, here's your movement score, they're ready to return back to play. Some customers have been able to test so many people, they have their own criteria for that.
Okay.
What I would say, like, I just don't focus a ton on the movement score. A 60% for someone's like first time doing it is not a bad score.
Okay.
I think what I usually focus on is I'll say, okay, you scored a 62%. Each rep is scored. And it looks like maybe this wasn't a full test. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just level 1
Okay.
or level 2, I guess.
Yeah, so this isn't a full, so I would just say, every time you come in, I just want to see you progress towards the green. I want to see you
Okay.
get better. And I think if you're doing the levels, it's important to understand as you're adding more challenging exercises in, it's going to be more challenging to get a higher movement score.
Gotcha.
But definitely focusing on you're able to do more,
Okay.
right? So that's exactly what I'll say. Okay, so you scored a 62%. This is your first time doing the assessment. Every time you come in, I just want to see you progress towards the green. I just want to see you get better. Sometimes if I know the athlete, if they're type A, if they're mentally struggling through like rehab or something funky is going on at home, like maybe you know all of these things, and they maybe just can't handle seeing a 62%, I won't show them this. I'll just dive into the metrics.
Okay.
You just have to remember you're in the driver's seat. So if it's important for you to have them know what the movement score is, then great. But if you feel like they can't handle it, just scroll past it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so limb symmetry here. So you're 63% from your right to your left to your right. We like to see you about 90%. Okay, so we're going to dive into this and understand a little bit more what's going on here. You didn't lose your balance at all, so that's great. Okay, so you fought to stay up on one leg. The AMI rating here is your movement score plus all the additional factors. Okay, so if you've had an injury in the last year, that'll go into your AMI rating. If you're a female, that'll also go into your AMI rating, etc. Okay, so this will typically be lower than your movement score. All right, so on the limb symmetry index page, this is here to help you. Oh, this is why he scored so low on his. Just look at that real quick.
He's so bad with side plank.
Yeah, so he probably, so if we're looking at this, let's see. The LSI page is here.
Okay.
What'd you say?
I was like, because there was one where he really failed it, but that was not from yesterday. That was the other day.
So with the limb symmetry score, follow the colors, right? This is just here to like help provide where do I need to focus my attention and where do you need work on. So red is poor, amber is moderate, green is good. Okay. So if we're looking at this here, like I'm going to dive into the side plank to figure out what happened here. What probably happened is he probably moved in the first second of the assessment and then never recorrected back into that starting position.
Oh, okay.
But we'll look at that. You're scoring a 90% limb symmetry for your single leg squats. However, you're scoring in the amber, which is not terrible, but we want you to score in the green. So this is kind of an example of like they're symmetrically needing work on both sides.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Your ankle mobility is great. So we're going to dive a little bit more into the metrics to understand what's going on with your single leg and then your side plank on the left. Again, this is here to help dictate like what you're going to have a conversation with them in. So if you have like 5 to 10 minutes to review this with a person, pick a few of the reds, maybe some ambers, etc. Okay, so if I'm looking at this here, I would probably focus my attention on core because we can see that's a challenging thing for Angel. And then maybe also like that single leg movement. Okay. So if we're looking at core here, scored a 9 out of 30. So the important thing to remember with the plank is you put them in that perfect position. They're gaining points as they're moving through the plank. This is not an abnormal score to see. Okay, especially with like the athletes that have hamstring strains, low back pain, or like anyone who's coming in with low back pain, right? They don't know how to use their core. So this is not an abnormal score to see. So you put them in that perfect position. If they deviate outside of 8 degrees for 2 seconds or longer, it will knock them a point. If they deviate outside of 8 degrees and recorrect within 2 seconds back to that starting position, it will not knock them a point. If they deviate outside of 8 degrees and never recorrect, they continue to just deviate, it will continue to knock points.
Okay.
Which is
that could be why he was a 0.
exactly. So he probably moved in the first second and then never recorrected.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, if it's something where you're like, oh, they slipped, that's going to skew the results, you can press redo rep.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so 9 out of 30. So we're looking at this. So he deviated into the sagittal plane. So he went into extension, okay, right here at 28 degrees. That's his max deviation. So while he's doing any type of workout, he's going to use his back as opposed to his core. Okay. Rotation, he rotated in the transverse plane greater than 8 degrees. Now it's only 9.73. Okay, so the main issue is definitely going into extension here. Okay. He was able to stay up for the entire 60 seconds, so that's something to definitely applaud, and he did not fail.
Okay.
Okay. Something to make note of is if they do fail, our report is only going to analyze the time that they're up.
Okay.
Okay. So they could score, they could hold the plank for 20 seconds and not move, but they failed. That's probably going to score them maybe a little bit higher than if they had tried to stay up the entire 1 minute and deviate the entire time. Okay. So the period, the duration of them holding the plank is also going to be an objective assessment for you.
Yeah.
Right. So if this person's coming in today, they hold a 20-second plank, they score a 29 out of 30. Great job. You held it for 20 seconds. I don't want you, when you go to your workout class, you should not be holding this for longer than 20 seconds. The next time they come in, they're able to hold it for this entire 60 seconds, but they score a 15 out of 30. Remember, last time you only held it for 20 seconds. This time you held it for 60 seconds. That's awesome. Okay, you were able to hold it longer. However, now we're going to adjust your rehab plan and have you do like 2 sets of 30-second planks and just add to that because we're going to do quality movement here. Okay, so it's another way to objectively measure their plank. Questions on that, or does that make sense at all?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So flexion extension here, this is all based off of their normal curve of their spine. So their normal lordosis, like when they're standing, right? Their lumbar lordosis. So if they start in a very high extension, then like standing straight, if they have like extreme, like a string, lordosis, these numbers are going to be a little bit lower. Okay. If they have a pretty flat back, then you're going to see some of those higher numbers.
Okay.
The way that our system picks up flexion, we want this less than 30 degrees, is going to be if they actually flex over too far forward. So if their chest drops over their hips, they break in half. If there's a pelvic wink, or if they squat too low. So if you're seeing someone squat below parallel, I would just cue them out of that because it's going to skew that result. So if you see like them squatting past 90, just be like, hey, back off your squat a little bit.
Okay.
Now, if they're a power lifter or CrossFitter or something like that, and you want to see how they're typically squatting, so they usually will go past 90, then that's up to you. We're just giving you the metrics. Just know that it might be a little bit more flexion there. Okay. The lateral shift here. So all the positive numbers mean he's shifting over to the right. Negative numbers means he's shifting over to the left. So it looks like all positive. So he continues to shift over to the right side. So as he's squatting, he's shifting over to the right, which is kind of interesting because his left side plank is super weak. So he's not using his glute a ton, right?
Okay.
Now
Say that again. I'm sorry, Maka. Say that again about the lateral shift.
So every time you see a negative number, that means they're shifting to the left.
To the left. Okay.
Positive means to the right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So it looks like he shifts to the right literally every single time, right?
Right.
But he's staying within, it's just 1 or 2, 3 times, 4. 4 out of the 20 reps, he shifts too far to the right.
Too far to the right, yeah.
Am I super concerned about that? Not really. Like a little bit. Like there's 4 reps where you're shifting way too far to the right. But this is something that you can use for your for the person coming in with low back pain if they're starting to want to get back into weights. Right? So like I want to see what your body weight squat looks like first, and then let's transition you into weights.
That is so interesting. Yeah, yes, because this is a squat. So if he's shifting mostly to the right, what did you say about the single leg squat a while ago to correlate it to this?
Yeah, the single leg squat, I think you can use that from like a pelvic perspective. So if their hip drops,
Okay.
especially if he's on his left leg, his left plank that we know is weak.
Right.
He's not using his left glute like at all, right? And then I'd be really interested to see what his left single leg looks like.
Okay.
So if you're looking at like a scoring perspective, when we look at, let's see here. Yeah, there's a few where he probably squatted really deep, or the sensor was like
the number
tripped up by
3
his
is
pants.
90.43.
Yeah.
3 and 4.
Yeah, so I'm either thinking that he squatted really deep on that, or the sensor was clipped by his pants or something.
Oh, okay. We shouldn't do that, right?
Yeah, so if you're looking at, let's just give this for an example. Okay, so he lost points on, let's just go to rep number 5. He lost points on flexion, so he scored a 0 out of 30, and lateral shift because he was less than 7 and he was less than 8, or less than 30 degrees. If I'm looking here, he lost points, so he scored a 2.5 out of 3. We want this less than 30. He barely hit that, right? So he lost a 0.5 point, but he maintained his points from keeping the shift. So that's how the point system works. Any questions on this at all?
No.
All right, let's look at the side plank on this side. Okay, so max deviation for lateral flexion, 25 degrees. So he must have shifted right out of it right away because he was able to hold the 60 seconds. Rotation, he lost a few points out of that because he was outside of that 8 degrees, but the majority of it is because he went into lateral flexion. Okay. So not using that glute med, or maybe he slipped and we can just redo that side plank and see what happens. Okay, single leg squat on the right. So limb quality is 42 out of 60, scoring in the amber. It's going to give you an image right here where it's a little bit of a high Q angle, a little bit of valgus. If you scored in the green, it's going to go straight up and straight down. Okay. If you score in the red, it's going to give you a really high Q angle, a lot of valgus. So this is just an image for like the patient to understand like what's going on. Okay. Here are all of your metrics at the top. Your blue is your target value, so what you want them to hit. Below is the average, and then also the max. Okay, we're providing the metrics, you're making the call. Where do I focus my attention? Where the colors are. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where we want you to focus. So I actually like to go to tibial inclination first because I want to see tibial inclination. I associate that with depth of squat. Are they trusting their knee? Is this a true strength issue, or is this a skill perspective? Were they taught to shift into their heels, weight in your heel, hips back? Are they allowing their knee to translate forward? Okay, he does. He gets to the depth that we want him to. We want it greater than 31. He's at 37. That's awesome. Within 37 degrees, he goes into negative is valgus, positive is varus. The more provocative movement is valgus. Okay, so that's where we have it highlighted. He's in red because he went outside of the 8 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So on average, he went greater than 8 degrees, so he's scoring in the red here. So then I want to look at pelvic lateral tilt. This number will always be positive. Okay, it's an absolute value of all of these reps here. So what you have to do, negative means to the left, positive means to the right.
Okay.
The exact same thing as the double leg squat.
Right.
Always to the left, to the right. Okay, so if I'm thinking about this, you could also think about it left hip drops, right hip drops. Okay, so this number, I know it's always going to be positive. So what I need to do is I need to go through here and figure out what my trend is. Do I see mostly negative? Do I see mostly positive?
Mostly
We see
positive.
mostly
Yeah.
positive, exactly, right? So that means positive means to the left or to the right?
To the right.
Perfect. I'm standing on my right leg. Okay. If my right hip is typically dropping, I'm going into Trendelenburg or retro Trendelenburg.
Retro Trendelenburg?
Exactly.
Okay.
Nailed it.
I have to stand and really visualize it.
Totally. Well, I'm actually happy that you're doing that because so many people are like, I don't get this.
Hmm.
Okay, so now let's just play. We see mostly negative. Okay, so we see mostly negative trend. I know negative means going to the
Left.
I'm standing on my right leg. I'm going to the left, or my left hip's consistently dropping, so that's Trendelenburg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I lost my right glute med.
Yep.
So when you're looking at the pelvic lateral tilt, I have to think, what's my trend? What leg am I standing on?
Right.
Okay, so if we're going to the left side, okay, I'm on my left leg now. What's my
Mm-hmm.
trend?
You're
Typically
mostly
negative,
yes.
which is which direction of the hip?
Left.
So I'm standing on my left leg, typically left. What is that?
So your left hip drops to the left. So your
Correct.
retro Trendelenburg on the left.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. So you think, what's the trend? What leg am I on?
Okay.
Okay.
And so that means the left glute med is not working. Is that right?
Yeah, I think
Or
I
yeah.
think more like I'm side bending into my QL a little bit,
Right.
right? So like maybe my right QL, my left QL. I do think that there's like some contribution to like glute med,
Uh-huh.
but I would say definitely Trendelenburg's like the tall tale sign, like that is glute med issue, glute med weakness,
Okay. Yeah.
right? Okay. Good job. You picked that up really quick.
Thank you. I had to
Yeah,
stand and just really
honestly,
think about
yeah.
it.
Yeah. And then you can relate it back to like, oh, this is why you're having back pain because every time you squat, you're squatting into this back. Or if I'm taking through a running report or like a running assessment, I constantly see that left hip drop when you're on your right side. If I put you in a single leg hop, oh yeah, you're losing your glute every single time, right?
This is so cool.
Yay. Okay, so valgus varus speed now. So speed in the frontal plane. So how fast your knee is moving from valgus to varus. Okay, so we want speed to be low. Every patient, every athlete that you're going to look at, they're like, I want the speed to be high. I always want speed to be greater.
Right. Not
right?
for that one.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think of speed as, do you have control? Do you have stability? Right? So I'm understanding, okay, so every time your knee is moving side to side in a game or whatever you're doing, you're putting stress on the joint, stress on the ligament. right? And from a performance perspective, if you're not having stability, we have to stabilize you, and then you're able to make your next move. Do you need to get that phone? Are you good?
No, I got my front
Okay.
desk person there.
Okay. So they were able to maintain 16, less than 20 degrees. So their speed's not terrible. The only thing that they really need to work on here is the valgus motion, right? So their knees going into valgus. So let's do a little bit of glute med work. Something's going on through that QL. We already, so let's figure out what's going on here. Is this an ascending issue? Is it a descending issue? Now, if I had a high speed at a large magnitude of valgus, that's research saying that is a risky movement. That's
Yeah.
typical physics, right? High
Right.
magnitude at a high speed, that's creating a lot of force. How our system is scored, speed and valgus are the most important piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you're really, I have some customers that are really focused on the score, get the speed figured out, get the valgus figured out, right?
Right.
I like to dive into the metrics more. Like my thing is like tibial inclination. I want to make sure that you hit the depth first, and then I'm going to focus on the rest.
True.
But everyone's a little different. So like for example, on the webinar that I show you guys or that I send out, every single, it was a rugby player, and he did not hit tibial inclination at all on his impacted leg. But his other reps or his other metrics were in the green. And to me, so if I'm seeing say I see 27 degrees here of tibial inclination and the rest of it's in green, well, that's what you look like within 27 degrees. I want to know what you look like within 31 degrees, right?
Right.
So that's how I focus on the metrics. Because my thought is okay, I want you to get the depth first, and then we'll focus on your stability.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. What questions do you have here?
No, I don't. That's pretty good.
And then you have the reps as well. I think it's important to make note, if you have someone going into valgus, I like to check the reps below because it's an average of the valgus motion. So if I only have two reps where they're going into valgus and the rest are in varus, I'm going to focus on this valgus, but I'm also going to make note, okay, you only went into it 2 times, so the majority of your movement is varus.
Mm-hmm.
But you're always going to show the average of the valgus, their capability of going into valgus.
Okay.
Okay. And then the last one is ankle mobility. He did a really nice job. He hit within 40 degrees. Okay.
Yeah.
I also focus this a lot on tibial inclination. So if I'm seeing that they're not hitting the tibial inclination here, I'll look at the ankle lunge. Do you actually have the mobility to get there?
Right.
Okay. So that's kind of the quick and dirty of the report. What do you have? What questions do you have?
No, that's pretty good. I love it.
Good.
You have this recorded, right, Maka?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Don't forget to send it to me. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
I'm gonna. Well, I've learned my lesson after you. You have to hit stop recording first,